It is Monday. Oh, well, it's not Monday. Jesus. It's Thursday, May 9th, 2019.
That kind of week, brother.
It is that kind of week. And this is the MMA Beat. Sorry, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm from MMAFightingonSBN as well as SiriusXM. You know the gentleman to my left, Danny Segura from MMA Fighting, and then Iceman himself, Chuck Mindenhall, the man in the hat from The Ringer as well as MMA Fighting. If you've noticed, I look and sound dumber than normal because I had my stupid face operated on about 2 days ago, and I can't breathe very well. Hopefully I don't start bleeding on air. I didn't bleed too bad this morning, but it's been a bit of a rough run here.
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you showed up, man, under these conditions.
Yeah, I didn't want to, if I could be candid. But sometimes in life, when you're an adult, you got to do things you don't want to do. But here we are. Here are things that I do want to do. I want to watch UFC 237, which is going to be Saturday. So let's start there, gentlemen. I will start with you, Danny. UFC 237. It's going to be in Brazil. It's going to be headlined by Rose Namajunas taking on Jessica Andrade. First time that a strawweight title fight has headlined a UFC card. But here's the funny part about it. Rose Namajunas beat twice. I would say convincingly twice, although one was short, one was long. Right. Up to that point, the consensus best strawweight we'd ever really seen. And yet, heading into this contest, she's the underdog. She's the underdog against a woman that said greatest strawweight we'd ever seen, beat in Dallas. Why is Rose the underdog, and what do you make of that?
Well, we know in MMA styles make fights, right? So just out of MMA math, just because you beat somebody, that doesn't mean you can beat the person that person beat, right? So I think there's a few things to consider here. One, she's going into enemy territory, which is something that we don't really see with champions. You know, champions usually defend their belt in the territory. So
which says something by itself, by the way.
Yeah, of course. In Brazil, we know that this is not just like fighting in the UK or anywhere else. Brazil is specifically a hard place to fight in. You know, the food's different, right? The hotels sometimes don't have saunas, sometimes don't have like the adequate equipment to cut the weight. You know, the crowd itself can be very hostile as well. Plus, I think, you know, there is something interesting about this style, and I think Rose Namajunas on Monday on the MMA Hour, she said when you asked her, you know, what opponent can you compare her to, Jessica Andrade, and she didn't really have anybody to compare her to. She said she's a pretty unique challenger, so she is seeing a new look. I still wouldn't label her as an underdog, but you know, if that's what the betting lines have her as, you know, that's what they have her as.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because I think the Jędrzejczyk series should have boosted her stock, but I guess maybe it's just one of those situations when you break it up into, you know, how do gamblers bet anyway? It's all based on some kind of perception. Maybe people feel like she just had Joanna's number, which is a big number to have, but maybe that, you know, they want to see more out of her. If you look at it too, that first title fight against Esparza, you know, the way she was worked in that fight, I think that somehow lingers. It's always the first thing that somebody processes when they watch somebody, and I think that just kind of lingers over her career. So I don't know. I really think that going to Brazil is a big factor in something like that. But I think it's also a kudos to her for just being so strangely unorthodox and in her own head to just do these types of things. I don't know if the UFC incentivized or how they incentivized her to go fight in Brazil and basically give Andrade the emotional boost like that. But it speaks to kind of Rose Namajunas' mindset of how she doesn't want things necessarily catered to her. She's been very different in how she handles her career. She uses the spotlight well, but she doesn't seek it out. Just the way she operates is just a very different mindset. And this is just one more chapter for her. But I think the betting public, just the way Vegas works, I think that it's a perception thing. And right now, Andrade probably seems like she has more things in her favor.
You know, if I look at the story of Andrade here, it's pretty straightforward. She's been a contender who, you know, she changed weight classes. She had a couple of setbacks herself against Jędrzejczyk, but has since then just been on an absolute unbelievable run. The consensus clear challenger for this title. Now, maybe that will change with some other ones coming up the food chain, but right now, she deserves it. But for me, and when I look at Rose, and I try to think like what the story of this fight is, Chuck, it seems to me like this is not about popular gain, not this time around. This is about, as we noted, going to enemy territory, taking on people, taking on a contender people think has a pretty decent chance of beating her. This is an opportunity for validation.
Right.
When you think about what this could do for her career, do you share that sentiment of mine?
Yeah, I think that. Are you talking about Rose? Or are you talking about,
so, like, what does she benefit from here?
I think that she benefits if she's able to go in there and basically duplicate what she's done in her last 3 fights. And those 2 against Jędrzejczyk, I think that puts her on a different level. I don't think you'd see her as an underdog regardless of the situation in her next fight if that's the case. But I think it goes a long way. I think that it's just one of those things. She's 2-1 in title fights. Mm-hmm. There's still just enough of a suspicion that maybe we're not seeing everything yet. I think that lingers out there. So I think that this fight, especially going against the momentum that you just mentioned, because Andrade has been just a buzzsaw, and I think that goes into it too. The way she's beating opponents, and then to have to go face her out there. It's not to compare, the therapeutic use exemption that Vitor Belfort, but all those guys that went to Brazil back in 2013 and just got waxed. It almost has a feel of that. Like you're being kind of fed the steak under the door situation where you're like, hey, show up and face Andrade, just lock it up and everybody put the sheet on and catch the blood type thing. But it has that feel to it. But I have to admit, that's what makes it kind of romantically fun, is to see Rose have to go against the odds in that sense.
Yeah. I think, to your point, this is about validation, because if you think of the strawweight right now, really the most successful strawweight right now is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, just out of title defenses, right, and what she's done. Yes, Rose Namajunas is the champion, but, defeating Jędrzejczyk back-to-back, it's the same type of opponent, right? We know that she also trained with Valentina Shevchenko, which has beaten Joanna Jędrzejczyk as well. So right now we know that she can beat, Jędrzejczyk, but we don't know if she could be the strawweight queen, right? I think if she gets past Jessica Andrade, all of a sudden she starts getting into that conversation with Jędrzejczyk where, okay, maybe she can be one of the most successful strawweights as well.
And real quickly, do we think that the UFC is comfortable putting this fight in Brazil, in part because, one, they want to go to Brazil, but two, getting back to the lingering suspicion you're talking about, it's like, okay, if she could prove this, then we'll start putting her on bigger cards stateside.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I think that, like what you mentioned before, just her being the first strawweight champion to be on, the main event. I think that speaks to where they're at on that too. I think that the potential is still there. When you look back to the original impressions we had of Rose Namajunas, she was being compared to Ronda Rousey at the time, who was doing all this stuff in the UFC. She was on tough, right? And so she's coming up, and I think there was like this expectation she would do it. I don't know if we ever fully saw. It was almost like her losses kind of stood out more than her wins, even though her wins have been completely impressive. So this one, I think, it speaks to her star power, what they want her to be, but it also speaks to the opportunity they want her to seize, I think, to go in there and do that.
And what about Andrade? Are we missing something here, part of the story? I've been watching the embeddeds. I've been doing my research on this one. I saw the countdowns. Obviously been following her career for some time. She's an interesting character, but I don't know that we know, at least on the American state side of things, a whole lot about her. What part of the narrative am I missing here?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, that's where it's confusing, right? Because I think I know Rose Namajunas more so than I knew Andrade going into the fight. I really don't know. I feel like everything we've seen about Andrade is what makes her dangerous, but I don't feel like I'm missing anything about her. I just feel like she seems like she's got a head of steam, really. That's really what it seems like to me.
Yeah, she's super legit. I mean, her skills, she stands out from any other strawweight, because strawweight's usually 115. That's pretty low in weight. But for some reason, she feels like she's
like
a heavyweight. She's very
demeanor.
strong. And I think story-wise, she doesn't speak English. So at least stateside here, the UFC has always had a tough time marketing those kind of fighters. Like, look at Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo is who he is based out of his crazy win streak and what he achieved in the sport. But from a story side of things, we never really got that side, from the UFC.
All right, so let's talk about the co-main event here. I want to move through more topics today if we can. In the co-main event, you've got Anderson Silva taking on Jared Cannonier.
That's right.
Danny, on a scale of 0 to 1, how pumped are you?
I would say 3, say 4.
Okay, let me ask you this. Let's start this way.
Yeah.
What is the UFC doing with Anderson Silva?
I have no idea.
Why are they booking him this way?
I have no clue. This is extremely bizarre. Anderson Silva at this point, Anderson Silva can do either two things. Either you put him in a fight against somebody like Israel Adesanya where you can boost their profile, and I don't really, and this is I'm not throwing any shade to Jared Cannonier. I'm just calling things how I see it. I don't really see the it factor in Jared Cannonier, at least not yet, right? And then you're putting Anderson Silva against that. He should be either in two type of fights. Either, again, like a young prospect like Israel Adesanya, or maybe like a Vitor Belfort. Obviously, he's now at 1, but like somebody, another old dog that has a big name, and all of a sudden that card feels like it has like a really good co-main event. Anderson Silva versus Jared Cannonier doesn't feel like a co-main event to me. Yeah. It's just a weird fight to book him in. I don't know what else I can say about that.
It's a diminishing returns thing because after losing to Adesanya, and I think that even that Derek Brunson fight, it wasn't the greatest showing. He won it. It was his only win, I think, in the last six legit win. I guess the Nick Diaz fight was overturned. But the last legit win he's had in 6 years or 7 years, it's ridiculously long time. But it's just diminishing returns because each time he comes back, like I read Brett Okamoto's piece about there should be a story to his fights at this point, because what else are we doing? There should be some kind of hook as to why you're watching this fight. I can't find the hook on this one either. I when they first made it, I was like, what are they trying to do? Is this a fight to get him correct again, to get him a win, and then launch him towards something? Was there a plan in place? Because I really don't understand what a win against Jared Cannonier really does for him at this point. And he's so out of touch. So drastically out of touch. Anderson Silva, when he's talking about Conor McGregor, I feel like we're in two different orbits now. Like, there's the collective idea of what's going on in MMA, and then there's Anderson Silva's world where he's like, this is a super, super, super fight. And I'm like, a super, super, super fight? Like, this fight is, nobody wants that fight. Yeah. Nobody wants that fight at this point.
It seems to me like he's fighting these guys, like he knows he's past it, and so he's fighting these guys almost as like a charity to the fans. That's like it's an exhibition, and we're just lucky to watch it.
He's dialed into some self-importance that is just not the reality of our times. It's like, I get it. The guy was a GOAT. I mean, he still is. I think if you look back, it's hard to not call him maybe the GOAT, right there with John, like a couple of guys.
Yeah.
But I'm like, at this point in time, given where, all the checkered stuff that has happened to him over the last bunch of years and being like 40-something years old, I'm like, I think he values his position more than the fans do at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. And this feels like if you were playing like the UFC game, you just pick like random characters, and then that's the kind of fight that shows up. Yeah, it really has no story to it. We'll see. To your point, something that you mentioned interesting. He feels like he's doing just exhibition matches, just for the fans, like as a charity thing. But I feel like that works in certain matches. For example, Israel Adesanya was down to go technique for technique and compete with him in that level.
That's a good point.
And that was fine.
Yeah.
I don't feel like Jared Cannonier is that type of guy. Jared Cannonier is going to be like, I'm going to use my athletic power, my speed to do that. And man, that's just not the type of matchup that I want to see.
If he grinds out like a 3-round victory, if Jared Cannonier just kind of, your basic, bring the lunch pail and beats him across 3 rounds, what does that do for anybody? Yeah. That's the problem. I like when there's a future to a fight, like there's some kind of springboard or something's happening there. I just don't know what it does for him. If he goes in there and knocks Anderson Silva out, I think that boosts his profile a little bit. But if he just grinds out a victory, I'm like,
and also,
that's expected,
Israel
right?
Adesanya has, I think, I'm not making anything up here, has a flair for the dramatic.
Sure.
Excuse me. He looks and acts a certain way. He's got a certain kind of swag.
He was willing to put himself at risk.
Yeah, but also like Jared Cannonier, I remember this distinctly. I had him on my radio show, and he was asking for pizza recommendations when he fought in New York. So a buddy of mine has lived in New York City since 1998, and he gave him like this list of like only a New Yorker would know. And then Jared went and got a slice in Times Square. It's sort of like that's kind of who he is.
The best place on earth.
He wins the fight. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I expect him to beat Anderson Silva here probably pretty handily, but he doesn't. And I don't say this pejoratively. He's just kind of a relatively ordinary guy.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but it takes away from a narrative that with this larger significance to things that would ordinarily be there.
He's not going to be able to use Anderson Silva as a catapult anywhere. That's the thing that's weird, right? Like, if it's a guy who he's kind of, the radar's beeping on him as he's approaching, like Israel Adesanya, it makes it a different kind of setup. That one made sense on that level, but this one, I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I guess what you want to maybe see is it's the same thing as every time you're like, well, maybe we'll see some vintage flashback of the old Anderson Silva in there, and we'll get nostalgic about it. But honestly, I don't know beyond that. Emotionally, that's kind of that's the end of it.
Yeah, this is a weird matchup.
Well, let me ask this way: what can Cannonier reasonably get from this? Because let's say, look, if it goes there and it's like a 3-round split, probably not much.
Yeah.
If he goes there and just bodies him in like a round. There might be something to that, actually.
Probably his best.
I think maybe we'll have to wait and see how the fight actually feels, but I feel like if that does happen, the storyline would more be like, wow, this is sad, watching Anderson Silva in this situation, rather than, wow, look at Jared Cannonier, look at what he just achieved. Again, we'll have to see how the fight plays out. Maybe it's very competitive and he actually pulls off the win and you go, wow, Jared Cannonier is super legit, right? But it's just not set up to feel that way. I feel like in this situation, it's either Anderson Silva looks great or Anderson Silva's going to look really bad.
And you get the feeling that Anderson Silva thinks he's one win away from being able to call any shot he wants in the world, which is the most bizarre of it. Also, if he wins, you feel like he's going to revert back to the way he used to be, where he's like, I want this guy, and that's going to become a public thing, which is just even beyond awkward at that point.
Yeah, if he knocks out Jared Cannonier, the I want to fight McGregor talk is going to go into orbit, at least from him anyway. I don't know that he'll be able to convince the masses.
Yeah.
I'll go start this way, work this way forward. Any other fight on the card worth, or at least capture your attention in some capacity or another?
Oh, I mean, Volkanovski, like that kid has been, every time I see him, I'm more impressed. And, if you talk to him, he's a very down-to-earth former rugby player. I think he's got a lot of unpacked star potential. I think he's got more charisma probably than we realize. So I'm really anxious to see how he handles the biggest test of his career, because that's the perfect setup for a fight, right? A guy who's in Jose Aldo, who's all of a sudden back. He looks a little bit more like himself, and now he has to go through this crossroads with this guy who's coming up.
Let me ask you this. Actually, I'll ask both of you this one. A lot of people complained about the matchmaking in this one, where they're like, "Why are they matching up Jose against this guy like Alexander Volkanovski?" Whatever happened between Dustin and Max is still the featherweight champion, and if Jose wins again, he's the consensus number one contender. He's already not just lost twice, he's been stopped twice. Why would the UFC book him against a guy who would be a fresh matchup for Max Holloway? What do we make of this?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I thought when this was booked, it was poor matchmaking. I think Jose Aldo, as long as he remains at featherweight, he's going to be a cancer to that division, because he is outside of Max Holloway, he's the best, period. I mean, he's been destroying everybody. Volkanovski has a solid chance. I'm not going to say he's going to go in there and get smoked, but it's still pretty risky, because you got a nice contender. You got somebody that can offer a nice questions into a Max Holloway matchup, because he hasn't versed somebody like Volkanovski. And all of a sudden, you're putting him against somebody that's a very risky fight, and he could potentially lose. So I don't really get the matchmaking in this one.
It could be a little bit of matchmakers reading the tea leaves a little bit, looking back at the Jeremy Stevens fight with Aldo, or maybe Moicano, where both guys started off a lot stronger than it ended up. Obviously, Aldo showed the guts in his vintage form by coming back and winning those, basically looking great in the end. Maybe they look at this as like a little kick of the ice flow. All right, we're going to send him on his way by putting Volkanovski in there. You know what I mean? There might be a little bit of that.
Do you like Volkanovski to win?
I do, actually. I just think the kid is. I think that
you were talking about Andrade's momentum.
He's
How
like
about
this, right?
Yeah.
He's on an upward trajectory, and I think that he's probably going to be the best form he'll ever be in this fight. I would be surprised if he came out and he looked sluggish or anything like that. Obviously, he's hungry. This is, I think he's going into enemy territory. He knows that. I think that the setup for him is probably a big deal, and he's I feel like you're going to see the best version of him.
Yeah. Maybe I'm underestimating Volkanovski, but I feel like Aldo has already received that look. And, shouts out to Alexander Lee, who made a point of this on the A-Side live chat. Aldo beat a prime Chad Mendes twice. And I don't know if prime Chad Mendes is I don't know if Volkanovski is as good as prime Chad Mendes. I mean, he already got that look of facing a really, really great wrestler that puts on a lot of pressure and that also has really good striking. So it's a tough matchup for him. Yes, I also know that was also a prime Jose Aldo. He's a little past it now. But it's a very tough matchup. I have Jose Aldo.
He does get hit, though, Aldo. So it's like I can imagine a scenario where he just takes one early and it's just...
Yeah, and the thing is, people are like, his chin is gone. His chin is not gone, but it's not what it was. And against a guy like Volkanovski, who, by the way, is a volume attacker.
It's definitely more susceptible. Like,
Certainly.
he leaves it out there a lot more.
Well, he has yet to get, knocked out. He's been hurt, but he hasn't been, knocked out cold.
Max Holloway put a beating on him. I mean, you're right. He wasn't unconscious, but...
Yeah.
Those were some. I mean, he took the life from that guy.
Lot, yeah. I mean, look how he's looked since. So.
Yeah, no, he's looked good. All right. So, but what about you? Any other fight on this card capturing your imagination for one reason or another?
You know what? I'm gonna go way down the line and say Betch Correa versus Irene Aldana.
That
fight has been booked 5 times. I don't know if you guys know that.
Is that the Habib versus Tony of the women's
division? Yes. That fight has been booked, I think, already 4 times, something ridiculous, and always something happens at either end. And, knock on wood, finally it's happening. And I'm curious to see how it looks.
I'm here for the Betch Correa stare downs. Yeah. Those are always the best.
Those are always fun.
She has, talk about charisma. She's got a little bit of it too, being like, the MMA world missed me. They needed me and things like that.
And it's funny, all the fans are like, no, who is she? But then that was the most replied tweet or whatnot. It's like, yeah.
She's a bit of a troll artist as well.
She's got a heel element to her for sure.
All right, so how about this one? I'll pick the sad story here. Clay Guida going up against BJ Penn.
So we had to go there.
BJ Penn, by the way, not a lot of people are talking about this.
It was only happy things here.
Yeah. Have you seen my face? Nothing happy about it. But the point being is, a lot of people have said, what is the UFC doing with BJ Penn? Remember, BJ Penn is still living with these, they are reported and documented, but they are still allegations about marital abuse and drug use. And again, how much of that is true, how much of it is not, I don't really know. But certainly there's a cloud hanging over him, Danny. What is the UFC going to do with BJ if he wins? What are they going to do with him if he loses?
I hope they stop giving him fights and
One way or the other?
yeah, one way or the other. I think BJ Penn should have retired years ago. I mean, I think after that second loss to Frankie Edgar, right, when he dropped to 145, I think we should have been done there. But, you know, he obviously kept fighting, and here we are. And you just hear these reports. Again, they're, you know, reports, accusations, but like, you know, it was his ex-wife, right, that said, you know, he uses camps to stay sober, and that's very worrisome. And we know, for example, Tony Ferguson had a bit of some, you know, mental issues, and the UFC had to step in, and he said something like, "I'm working with the UFC to solve this out." I hope that the UFC does the same with BJ Penn. Again, these are just accusations, but you look at his age, you look at, you know, he hasn't won a fight in almost a decade now, 9 years. That I hope the UFC, you know, steps in there and be like, BJ, you know, let's figure this thing out. Like, what do you want to do? Because I certainly don't want to see him fighting. I'm going to watch just because it's on the card. And look, at the end of the day, you kind of do want to see what happens, right? But, you know, as a fan, I'm a fan of BJ Penn. I don't want to see him continue fighting.
I mean, back in the day when Dana still did his scrums, you know, at fight weeks and things like that, I remember, this is clear as day, he was talking about BJ Penn being one of those guys. He's like, he just doesn't know what to do with himself if he's not fighting. If he's not in a training camp, you know, you fear that he's going to get up to no good. He's going to start doing stuff that he shouldn't be, things like that. Like, he was talking about a friend, you know, Dana would slip into that a little bit. And it's funny to see, it's funny in the weird sense to see the time play out, and basically we're at the same spot with what he was saying years and years ago. And I think that really is the case. You know, I think that you just look at it, and I don't think he knows what to do outside of fighting. And unfortunately, his name is intact. Like, we know who BJ Penn is. You know, what we remember him, it will always remain there. But where he's at right now in life is just very, very difficult. And it's weird because it's a fight game. You don't want to see guys that you kind of idolized fans idolize, take too many beatings. It's just, it seems cruel at some point.
Yeah, and it's also scary. I mean, recently we've seen his generation. There's been a few articles that have come out. Vanderlei Silva has opened up about CTE. Babalu Sobral was the recent one. We also know about Matt Hughes as well. Look, you know, he is of that generation, and he did so well in his career that he never really took that punishment. He was never knocked out like multiple times or anything like that. But nonetheless, you know, we know how brutal this sport can be, and man, I don't want to see him in one of those headlines down the line.
It's crazy too, because Clay Guida is still a capable fighter who's a veteran. He's been around. He's going to know how to, you know, handle himself in a fight. We've already seen him against Dennis Seaver, who was basically an older guy on the way out of the UFC, and he couldn't beat Seaver. And then they put him against Hall, who's a BJJ guy who wasn't really like the biggest threat to like pound his face with his fist. And that fight went the way that I'm not sure what we should be looking for in this fight.
An exit.
That's what it is. But I feel like we've been at this exit a few times. So I hope if it goes the way we fear, I hope that he does go through that exit door.
Any thoughts about how it will do on pay-per-view? There are some reports. Jeremy Botter over at his new project Wizard had said that UFC 230, which one's 6?
Yeah.
Was it? Did 109,000, 110,000. There's a lot of different ways to evaluate the success or lack thereof. There's a thread by John Nash. I encourage everyone to look at it. I retweeted it. This one's probably going to do real bad, if I'm guessing.
I would say UFC 236 had way more intrigue than this card.
And it was domestic.
Yes, it was domestic. That's the big issue, right?
Yeah.
Because even UFC, some of those UFCs, like the Aldo one, was at UFC 142. I don't think it did very good numbers against Chad Mendez. And even UFC 134, which was their return, I don't remember doing gangbusters. So my thing, I think that you're right. It seems doomed to be one of their low ones.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go out there and say 50,000.
Yeah, I think it's about right. Something like that. Even that
insane.
one.
And that used to be just, 50,000 was just a core. Like, it started there, right? It used to be there's 50,000 no matter what. So, I don't know.
So this is not the newest news, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it. I don't want to spend forever on it, but I did want to talk about it because it relates to this pay-per-view news. So Brock Lesnar tells UFC he's not going to compete anymore, although that's not quite true from what Dave Meltzer's reporting. Apparently what Dave Meltzer says is that Brock wanted a flat fee of a certain number, and UFC said no, so he said, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. And so they're going to go with DC versus Stipe 2. The big takeaway from this story, when you evaluate everything, is what? What's the number one lesson?
The UFC should maybe not be as public about a kind of dream fight or a novelty fight in such a way, because what basically happens is like, hey guys, look, there's a Maserati that we're going to put you in. You get to drive around in the Maserati, and they're like, nope, you're going in the Elantra. You know what I'm saying? That's what it feels like in the end, because they dangled the good thing first, and then you get the second thing. And I'm like, I feel like that's the buzzkill feeling of that is what strikes me immediately. if you get past that and you think of it from an insider standpoint, where you're basically like, this is it's a good fight, right? Like you're like Cormier. He knocked out Miocic, but he caught him too. And you're like, I don't think you saw the best Miocic. I'm sure that they do it again. It maybe has a whole different outcome. There's still tons of doubt over that fight, and obviously Miocic holding the record for most defenses and all that probably deserves. I know that we've talked about all this stuff a million times. You could make the case he deserves to be there again, and I feel like that was probably their next fight. The other thing was the domino effect. Because they could have, if they're not waiting around for Brock Lesnar, and I know that there was like this back surgery for Cormier and all this that would complicate it, but if they're not waiting around for Lesnar, John Jones was there. I mean, he's fighting these other guys. They could have made that fight and been promoting that for July. You know what I mean? Or something like that. But because we were waiting on Brock and we were fixated on this, a lot of other things were altered.
Is it good or bad that Brock's not in the mix?
I think it's bad.
For you.
Well, for me, I think it is bad because I wanted to see that fight. I wanted to see DC, get a big payday and walk away, with a big fight. But man, I think this speaks to like how the UFC is handling business now, because I wonder how many big fights we're gonna get, because we saw Conor McGregor, trying to make a comeback, and all of a sudden that's been halted. GSP retired, wanting to fight again, and now Brock Lesnar's doing the same thing. With that flat fee that they're getting from ESPN, they don't have that incentive as big of like putting on these big massive fights, and that's going to hurt the sport.
Let me push against that for just a second, because I had someone bring this up to me, and I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's worth considering. I have made that argument, and I do think in general it is true time to time. However, ESPN has got to be saying, right, if you don't want to bend at every interval, you don't have to.
Exactly.
But at some point, we want to see Conor on this platform. At some point, we want to see Brock or somebody. At some point, they do have to bring a big star through this portal, do they not?
100%. Yes. I mean, they have an obligation to bring in subscriptions and big numbers to ESPN Plus, but I would say, that incentive is a lot lower now because it's not strictly hurting their pockets, whereas they had to put on big fights because that was exactly how they would make revenue. So yeah, there is some truth to that, but I think, it's nice to get that upfront payment, right? And I think Curtis Blades put a tweet out that I think encapsulated everything pretty well. It's like, F you, Brock Lesnar, holding out the division. But I think that goes a long way to the UFC as well. Like, look, you just kept waiting for this guy and kept dangling this fight, and now we're not getting it. And it's a huge buzzkill.
You think Brock's really gone? I don't think Brock's really gone.
No. I mean, especially if the Meltzer thing is correct, which Meltzer's usually pretty good about keeping his ear to the
UFC lowballing somebody doesn't sound like aberrant behavior.
But I'm like, the guy obviously does this a lot. He does some version of this kind of leveraging game and take it or leave it, and then he goes and makes the money, and then he'll I think he resurfaces again.
Yeah. Also, hashtag MMA retirements.
Yeah, exactly. I had a thought about Brock I wanted to share. I want to see what you guys thought about it, because I obviously was out for a variety of reasons when the whole thing went down. And people were asking, like, what is Brock's legacy? Let's assume that he's done. I don't think he is, but let's just say that he is. Like, what would it be? To me, Brock has been like a mirror to MMA to let you really see what MMA is really about in certain capacities at every interval. So he came in on this boom period, and you could read into the boom period of MMA through Lesnar, and that there was a pro wrestling crossover audience, and how big pay-per-view was at the time, and how important it was to be a big, strong athlete at heavyweight at that time. That's not necessarily the case anymore, but it was then. And then the diverticulitis thing, I don't think there's any real analog for. But his return at UFC 200 and how it didn't work because of the USADA era. And in every interval through his career, you can understand MMA better by watching how MMA was affected by him.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, by the way.
Yeah.
True.
Is that, you guys agree with that or not?
I agree. I've never thought of that, but that's actually very true. He has literally been right there for all of these things, right?
He's that rooster on the top of the barn by the weather vane,
Yeah, and it's also because he hasn't been consistently fighting.
Right.
So it's not like we saw, progressively things change. No, he's literally stepped in at different
eras.
He
comes into these big moments, and so that you can see the change moment to moment.
I wonder if he's going to come in the ESPN era. That's the next one.
And again, it would tell you a lot about the growth and change and everything else about MMA. It's kind of funny in that regard. Let's talk a little Bellator. We haven't talked Bellator in a while. I feel like we got to. It's Bellator 221 this weekend. It's an interesting weekend for Bellator, Danny.
It is.
For two different reasons. Let's start with the tournament. One, there's the tournament. Okay? Douglas Lima taking on MVP. Has this tournament petered out a little bit?
What do you mean exactly?
So Douglas Lima, I think, fought, 8 months ago for the first time? He's facing MVP. Maybe folks don't think it's that competitive because they really like Douglas Lima. Maybe they don't really know Douglas Lima. Maybe it's a lot of factors. I'm not here poo-pooing the tournament. I think the tournament is great. I'm not poo-pooing the fight. I think the fight is great, especially it's a tournament. The guys got to where they got. I don't see a lot of chatter about it.
I think this card has flown a little bit under the radar, but it's also, there's so much going on in the world of MMA right now that, it's hard to stand out. But, dude, this is a great tournament. This is something that I'm really excited about because fans for the longest time were complaining and crying about how MVP wasn't getting anybody legit, how they want to see him get challenged. Well, you got the chance now. We got the chance with Paul Daly, but I feel like that didn't really scratch the itch too well. And all of a sudden, Douglas Lima, he's going to put it on MVP. So at this point, MVP, he's 32 years old, 14 fights into his MMA career. There's no more catering. There's no more prospect building. This is it. Either you're legit or you're not. And we're going to find out on Saturday if he's that guy. And I feel like you can do the same thing on
but what you're doing is you're selling me the merit of the tournament. I don't need the merit sold to me. I'm asking about to what degree has it maintained visibility by virtue of its own strengths.
I think there's an argument that has dwindled down a little bit.
I'm convinced. You're convinced. He's convinced. You don't have to convince me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there is some interest loss just because how long it's taken to play out.
Problem. It always is a problem.
Yeah, and it doesn't help also the champion Roy McDonald with those comments that came out. That also, you want to see a fired up Roy rather than like, hey, I don't know if I have it in me anymore. So yeah,
I think it has petered out. Part of it is Douglas Lima never seems to attract, for whatever reason, a diehard's critical eye. We just don't make him an event. We don't circle him. I don't know why it is. Honestly, if you watch him fight,
he's so good.
He is so good, and he's literally like an assassin the way he approaches it. I find him fascinating in that sense. But for whatever reason, he has not translated, and so he's been quiet as usual. I think the bigger issue was that Daly MVP fight, because I was there, and that building sagged and died by the second round.
It was not a star-making performance. It was not,
and I think that for some reason that just, it was like, watching the flowers in the garden wilt and die, all at once. And I for whatever reason, this is carried over. Not many people are talking about this. If MVP had gone in there and just smoked Paul Daly, I feel like there would have been a lot more chatter about this, but he just didn't do it.
All right.
Also, give it some time, because right now we have this fight. It could be very exciting. It could be a good fight. And then in June, we have, Gracie McDonald. So things could turn
out. What about that NYC card has turned out to be phenomenal. And I'm looking forward to that being here. I'm sold on the tournament. I love it. I love the idea of the tournament. I think the fights, not all of them have gone that great, but the people who are there who should be there, I'm looking around and I'm like, is it because I've been out? I don't see people chatting about it too much. That takes us, though, to the main event. Now, this one actually has captured a lot of attention. It's a champ fight, if you think about it, right? If I'm not mistaken.
That is.
Although it's in a weird way, but it's a grudge match, man.
That's what's fun, right?
If you have followed the Pitbull brothers at all, Patricio Pitbull and whoever runs his Twitter account has been hammering Mike Chandler for years. Now, Mike has fought his brother, I believe, twice.
Yeah. It feels like they fought 30 times.
It feels like they have.
He's always going against a Pitbull.
Dude, it's the Hatfields and the McCoys, man. It is a show. Do you like how, I got to tell you, I love how angry it is.
Sure.
It's a little bit more one-sided than it is mutual, but the fact that Chandler has the wins and Patricio has the animosity, it makes for an interesting tension.
You just start with the fact that a partition is raised, right? They couldn't have faced each other, and that was one of the reasons when he's fighting Patricky and he's knocking Patricky out in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And the other guy's barking at him. You're like, well, you guys can't fight. But here, you get past the partition and you realize that there's a revenge factor, right? This one guy wants to avenge his brother against this guy who, took his soul and put it in a jar on his bookcase, for a while. And I'm like, to me, I love those setups. There's an organic feel of bad blood always translates to a good fight. I feel like, and Michael Chandler, let's put it this too, these are two of the first Bellator stars. They're guys who are Bellator through and through. They're the guys that have been there the whole way.
Yep.
And there's an element too that, Chandler should win, right? Chandler is who he is, but he ever so often takes his foot off the gas and loses this kind of fight. So, we've seen it going back to the Will Brooks series. People thought that he was going to smoke Will Brooks. He didn't. And then, the Brent Primus fight. So I think that element of doubt plays over just a little bit too, and that adds something for me.
Yeah, I think the bad blood is what's really capturing my attention here. I have this clear picture of like when Chandler knocked out Patricky, and then you just see Patricio on the cage just yelling at him, and they're just going back and forth. I mean, he knocked out his brother in front of him. You know,
I was there,
and then got on the cage and heckled him, and then in media interviews called himself a dog owner.
Yeah,
like whoa.
This is super intense, and I'm looking forward to it. And like you said, these are two Bellator OGs, and it's always nice seeing that because it feels like sometimes the big fights that Bellator is able to put on is because of names from some other organizations. Right. This is 100% Bellator, and it's nice to see the Bellator brand out there. Also, it's kind of interesting that both UFC and Bellator, within a couple of months of each other, are having their featherweight champ go up against their lightweight champ. I suspect, though, Max was a really big featherweight. Mm-hmm. Patricio is not a really big featherweight. He's not by any means a small one, but he's far from big. And Chandler is an enormous.
It's fueled like the Count of Monte Cristo. It's all revenge and taking blood, right? Like it doesn't matter the size of him. In fact, he just wants to go exact revenge.
Let me ask you about one aspect. I had Michael Chandler on the MMA Hour on Monday, and I asked him about it because it's something that's been really sticking out to me. Patricio has been out there just absolutely beating the drum that Michael Chandler's a PED user. Now, to our knowledge, that is not true. And I asked him about it explicitly. He said it's absolutely not true.
You asked Chandler about it?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I asked him, is there any merit to it? Because a lot of media will be like, how do you feel about it? No, is it true? Is it true or is it not true? And I have to rely on his answers. I don't suspect it, but I had to ask him. He denies it. And then I asked him a different question, which was, do you feel like your reputation has been stained by a guy just getting out there and saying these kinds of things? And you not really having all you could say is no. It's like how does it feel to beat your wife? Right. But I didn't beat my wife. Yeah, how does that feel, wife beat? You know what I mean? Like, how do we feel about fighters accusing each other of things like this? And then how do you cover it when it is essentially kind of baseless?
So if in the end it came out that Chandler was cheating or he was doing PEDs, I guess you'd look back on this and be like, well, he was trying to tell us. We were ignoring him, but he was trying to tell us. But because it's unsubstantiated and it's just kind of out there, I always feel like this kind of thing is a bad look.
Yeah.
Because there are very few things that are below the belt, but this is one of them where you just start making stuff up. If that's what the case is, you can't just start making stuff up about somebody. I mean, it's just.
And what people always say is like, oh, well, Cody was saying stuff about TJ and it all came true. Okay, a lot of it came true. But you could go down the list of people who've accused the other person and none of it has come true. Yeah. So I was battling with this. I was like, how are you supposed to cover this? I don't really know.
Yeah, it's weird because you kind of have to cover it just because it's part of trash talk, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is a bad look, not only for that fighter, but just for the sport in general, Yeah, it's a weird one. I guess you just got to be careful in stating that, look, these are claims. Chandler has never failed any drug test, and kind of be very clear about that.
I know, here we are talking about Chandler with drug. The guys, but for the fact that Patricio brings it up, we would probably never bring it up.
It's crazy with Michael Chandler, right? Like, he's a guy who's been nothing but loyal to Bellator. He sought opportunities. He goes and adopts this kid and has this whole feel-good story going on, and yet we end up talking about him in a way that over speculation of something that's unsubstantiated. Yeah. It's really weird. The fight game is very strange in how it works. But it tells you, man, the power you have of a microphone and just kind of repetition. If you just keep saying stuff, eventually it sticks. Or somebody hears it and like, hey, wasn't that guy? Didn't he get busted for PEDs? You know what I mean? It's one of those strange setups. But I don't like it. I don't like. Where are the boundaries then? If somebody's just going to make up stuff about him,
I mean, or if you're going to say something like that, well, where's the evidence? Like,
true.
If you're going to come out with these claims, what do you have to support them rather than,
This is MMA. You don't need evidence to make claims.
That's a good point.
All right, so then that takes us to something else. We discussed it briefly, so Chuck, let me go to you very quickly on this one. Conor, Cowboy. So Cowboy wins, defeating Ally Quinta. By the way, I was looking at some of the Cowboys' wins. The Ally Quinta win stands up there as one of the best.
Oh, yeah. This was a fight designed for him to lose, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, the times he's faced guys like this, I feel like the guys who, maybe are at the top or near it, or for whatever reason, that's when he has dropped the ball. Like he beats the guys who are kind of usually the the up and comers, like the prospects. He's able to beat them. He's able to kind of discard some of the known names like the Matt Browns, the guys who are the brawler. Like he's able to do that.
Yep.
But if there's a guy who just seems superior, sometimes he'll fight down. I don't know why. He just doesn't show up in the moment. So it was telling for him to go beat Iaquinta. This was a big one.
All right, so then it gets to this question of like, should he face Conor? Let me get your temperature on this one. Do you like that fight? Do you love that fight? I guess actually is a better question.
So I love any idea that Conor McGregor would fight one of these guys. Like he's certainly one of them at this point. I feel like they've had multiple moments where we've contemplated it, going back to that big Go Big event or whatever that was back in the day. They've been kind of at it since then, and we've had many times where we've contemplated it. And I feel like at this point, Cowboy-Cerrone couldn't have put himself in a better position to get it. And so at this point, I'm like, I hope it happens. I don't know if I would say I love it. I love it as much as if Gaethje fought, something like that. I think there's a couple of fights they could put together. But yeah, I would like to see it. I just want to see. I would like to stop flirting with the idea and actually book it. But at this point, I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what McGregor, like you hear Dana White and he says he's negotiating, we're going to have something in the summer. That would make sense. That's what Cowboy wants. So I hope for Cowboy's sake, and I think that that's a winnable fight also for Conor McGregor. I think it makes sense on that level.
Yeah. I love it.
So let me ask you this then, because we talked about it a little bit already. Given what we talked about with Brock, do you have concerns that they will not be able to make a Conor and Cowboy fight? In terms of ESPN, money, the plus thing, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, of course. I think it's very possible that it doesn't happen, but I'm not too worried about, how the negotiations are going to go down, because Conor McGregor is not the champion. The ball keeps rolling with Khabib defending his belt against Dustin Poirier, against whoever else comes up. The issue with the Brock situation was that Brock wanted to fight the champion. So all of a sudden, you got guys like Francis Ngannou, JDS, who are very deserving of fighting for that belt, waiting and having to take other fights that they probably shouldn't have if the champion would have been active, right? Yeah. So that's my issue with it. But look, this fight is not clogging anything up. So, take your time to, for whatever, however long it takes to build, do it. But I'm all for Budweiser versus Proper 12. Yeah. I'm all for it.
I mean, back in the day when he was fighting Nate Diaz, McGregor, it didn't make complete sense. Obviously, it was circumstance that put them together, and then it became the series, and off Conor went on his many digressions, But I feel like this is a fight similar because Nate Diaz to me was like a anti-man. He was it kind of joined forces with Conor at the right time, and they were actually kind of fighting the UFC together in this weird way. I feel like Cerrone is kind of the opposite in that sense. He's more of like the company guy, but he's similar in terms of his approach to the fight game, like the way he fights, the way he brings it every time, the way he kind of just no nonsenses it. And I love that aspect. I love when guys are like that. You just want to see a guy go in there. It doesn't matter what Conor says to him, tries to rebel. You know what I mean? Like they're going to go out there and he's going to fight exactly the same. So I like that setup.
And I also, something I mentioned in the MMA hours, something the UFC needs to get better at is cloning their stars. Like at this point,
cloning?
Yeah, at this point, McGregor is I mean, he's his own thing, but he's also like a platform for other fighters to boost their profile, like just like Nate Diaz or like Ronda Rousey did to Holly Holm, right? So you need to start matching him up in fights where the B side can get some benefit.
Yes.
So like Nurmagomedov, right?
Exactly. Look at Nurmagomedov. Look, he became all of a sudden a huge star just from that rivalry with Conor McGregor. And Conor McGregor doesn't have that many fights left if he's gonna ever return. I mean, he might have like 2 or 3. I don't see him having like a 6-fight career, at this point. So put him up against other guys that have characters that that you can potentially get out there and put in big cards.
Let's make a bet. If they make it, okay, actually, let me ask it this way. Make a prediction. Do they make it or not? Does the fight happen in the summer?
I'm going to say it does.
I'm going to say it does in August.
I'm going to say it doesn't.
Okay.
I'm going to bet against it. I'm betting it doesn't happen in the summer.
Oh, okay.
It could happen fallish.
I think it happens.
I could see it. I think it'll happen.
Yeah?
Yeah. The time frame, you're right, is like the slippery slope there.
But you got to wonder, does he want to go before Khabib in September or after?
Right.
And part of me feels like he wants to go after.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it, too. Yeah.
Yeah, he also has to see how that one plays out, because if Dustin Poirier, manages to get that title.
Yeah, but he already fought and beat Dustin. Like, I don't think he Maybe he should. I don't know that he particularly fears that matchup in any particular.
But all of a sudden, like that's he has more of a claim to get that fight than a Khabib rematch.
Right. That's true. Now that brings us to another lightweight that I want to discuss here. That's Tony Ferguson. Now there are some indications this week. Pardon me, gentlemen. I'm sorry. There are some. Can I blow my nose on you? I'm sorry.
I'm good.
There are some indications this week that Tony Ferguson, I believe it was Brett Okamoto who reported it, that Tony Ferguson, we talked about it, he had changed management groups. He was with Paradigm, and now he's with Ballingy. And he met with UFC officials, and while nothing has been formally announced, it appears like things are very much moving in the right direction, Danny, for a comeback.
Yep.
Do you feel from the outside looking in that enough T's have been crossed and I's have been dotted that you feel comfortable? And again, it's not our choice, but we're just observers wondering aloud. Do you feel comfortable with the idea of him returning to the cage, given what we know about the struggles he's been facing?
I do. There's a few signs out there that one, we know that he was working with the UFC to, get the help that he needed, and two, his wife dropped the restraining order that she had, and they're back together. So those are all good signs. Also, I don't think he's gonna take any fight, any quick fight. It's gonna be probably a nice build-up for his return. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with him returning to the cage, and I'm sure he's gonna get a bunch of tests and whatever commission he decides to fight under, right? So yeah, I'm fine with him returning.
Yeah, you got to almost trust the system a little bit, trust the officials that are.
I mean, that's your only option.
That's really what it is.
You got to trust them that they're doing the right thing by him, and then you got to watch him. It's similar in a weird way to when Max Holloway was going to fight, obviously, and then showed those weird signs, and they had to call the fight off. Which fight was that? Which fight? But anyways, you know what I'm talking about.
That was before
that was the first, he was supposed to fight Ortega the first time.
That's right.
That's when Frankie.
We had to see him. It was weird. It was weird to contemplate him fighting. And when it finally happened, and we saw him go through his fight week, he's a little bit of an eccentric fellow, just like Ferguson. They have their idiosyncrasies. They're very different kinds of guys. But we saw Holloway go through his fight week, handle himself, and then look great in there. I think that's Ferguson's blueprint. He has to just go through his fight week, be who he is, look good in there, and then we'll put that aside. I think that it's going to take that sort of thing. Then you got to just trust the officials know what's going on better than we do.
Here's the part that is hard about trusting the officials when they're letting guys like BJ Penn fight. You're like, obviously BJ Penn, well, I don't know. Is that a guy that should be fighting right now? There's a lot of questions. You're like, Jesus, man. It's a different question. I'm with you guys. I kind of feel like, for whatever reason, I feel soothed. And my concerns are largely assuaged.
I think also I think it's fair to compare that to the BJ situation, but there's also key differences there. BJ, fight skill wise, he doesn't belong there anymore. Fight skills.
Right. So why is he fighting?
Exactly. But Tony Ferguson, he's a killer, right? He's his skill.
No, but that's not my point. My point is, if you're going to let a guy so utterly unqualified at this point, BJ's a legend, but he's not currently competing as a top tier lightweight. He's not even competing. I mean, he's far from that. You're going to let a guy like that compete, who else are you going to let compete?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I feel like two things give me pause. One is that Tony is so much more visible than BJ at this point. So if something went wrong with Tony, it would blow up much more. So that gives me, I think the UFC is aware of the optics of it.
Right.
And then two, you mentioned his wife has really, there was a video put out. Do you guys ever watch Mixed Molly Whoppery? Oh man, you are missing out. It's a guy who sounds like, I don't know, like a Coney Island guy who sells hot dogs or something. I don't know. But he's super smart, or I'm assuming it's a he because that's the narrator's voice. He makes YouTube videos, yeah? But they're long form and they happen after a story is almost over. And he made a point, and I thought it was absolutely true, which was Tony's wife went out of her way to make sure that Tony's reputation was not sullied in this by noting in her initial public statement that he's a great father, a great husband, we're just working through things, and then to your point, dropping it. So all of the response to Tony was, hey, it was almost like get well soon, man.
Yes.
Versus BJ, who everything has been secretive and quiet and, behind the scenes. This has kind of been out in the open. So to me, it feels like, check if I'm wrong, a little more transparent. A little bit more transparent.
Oh, yeah. And it helps that he kind of came out publicly and said, hey, guys, I'm going to seek the help I need. If just doing one little thing, I haven't really heard much from BJ Penn. And it's almost like they're sneaking him through these cards these days. And I'm like, it's just an odd look. But it's similar in a weird, like in spirit, but it's obviously a completely different setup for this. I agree with you. I think the scrutiny is so big on a guy like Ferguson, so they got to be right.
Because the fights that he is in at least the orbit of are Dustin, Khabib,
I know,
Conor. You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of media those guys are going to do.
Gaethje, right?
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
He's not fighting in any prelims.
Any thoughts about who he should fight?
That's the problem with the lightweight division right now. It's just so clogged that
There's still no answer to this question.
It could be Gaethje. I mean, I would.
To this day, man. I mean, it won't happen now. Now there's no easy way to make it unless he somehow slips in there, or somebody gets hurt, or whatever.
Yeah.
That'd be the weirdest thing for Ferguson to finally get the fight with Nurmagomedov after somebody falls out and he goes in there. But that's one of those situations where I wanted to see that fight just because of the styles. I think he's got the weird, unorthodox, it's sort of almost intangibles that might give Nurmagomedov the trouble. I would still love to see that fight. Obviously, that's not happening. So you could take any of those other names and I'd be fine with it. But I still want to see that one.
Yeah. I think if I were Tony Ferguson, I'd just wait. I mean, Khabib and Poirier are supposed to fight in September, right?
Yeah.
Look, Poirier didn't show up for the Nate Diaz fight, right? He had some issues. We know Khabib hasn't showed up to other fights as well. We know how crazy this sport is, and we know how the UFC machine, they always have to keep rolling. So who knows? Either guy could fall out, and then next thing you know, he's fighting for the belt.
This sport is so ridiculous that I think that's how Ferguson and Nurmagomedov will fight. It was when we never saw it coming. All of a sudden, they'll be fighting. Like, you know what I mean? Where he'll fill in. I know that's unpredictable, but I could see that basically being the setup for those guys.
All right, so that takes us to the final topic before Under the Radar. PFL makes its debut on ESPN tonight. Now, what's crazy about it is this is supposed to be PFL 12, I think. And in the press releases, they'll be calling it PFL 1.
Because it's a new season, Luke. Come on now.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
Still makes it PFL 12. It just makes it season 2. But, okay. How do we feel about what's going on ESPN, Danny? Feel like it's going to make it?
I think so. I think this is a great move for them because ESPN.
No, it's a great. Yes. When the season's over, are they in anywhere of a different place, really, when it comes to attracting a fan base?
I think they will, man, because ESPN it's a sports fans platform, right? And sports fans are used to a certain order, certain hierarchy, right? In soccer, we see it. In football, we sports fans are accustomed to a certain rule set and a certain pattern where they can, plan out and see the route for their favorite team, in this case, favorite fighter. With the UFC, dude, the UFC, I work on this full time, and I sometimes have a hard time following the sport, because there's so much happening, so much to consume. With PFL, it's pretty straightforward. So I think if you're a sports fan and look, you're not like super into fighting, but like you find it entertaining, it's an easy thing to get into. Okay, this guy's fighting this guy. There's a point system, and it's just easy to follow. So I think this is a perfect platform for them.
I dig it, and I hope it works. I really do, because the last season, I felt like it did what it wanted to do, right? Like, it got a couple of these guys who were recyclables, who were able to get in there and win this. And there's the one guy in Utah,
Sean O'Connell, who, by the way, is now a commentator of this season.
So you see how these things kind of pay forward. I was really interested to see if a lot of people would want to join the PFL after the last season, because you do see these millionaires. You see these guys cash in the $1 million check, and it is prize fighting. It hasn't worked out exactly like that. They brought in a few names, but I feel like this visibility gives them a little bit more. I feel like it's a nice second step, obviously. I think it's on ESPN 2, right?
Yes.
ESPN
so and then Deportes and Plus.
So it's like, but still, a very big step for them. And the visibility, I think, might help it because there was a lot. It picked up steam last season when it got toward the finals.
Yes,
I felt like we were talking about it then, but we were not talking about it during the season.
Yeah, the regular season was very much, was very much just filler.
Yeah.
And then you're right. I thought once it got to the playoffs, then you're like, oh, okay.
So at least this season they're hitting the ground running with this, and it'd be cool to see like what they're able to do with that.
I'm also curious to see Kayla Harrison's star power.
So let me get to that. So like, I disagree fundamentally with the idea that sports fans want to see a tournament. I don't think they would get in the way of a tournament. I think it depends, like anything else, on the nature of the tournament itself. What I do think is going to be a big test of the ESPN platform is, dude, Kayla Harrison, if they can just find a bridge for her to walk over, is going to be a star. Yeah. It seems like one of the most obvious things ever. Other than, do they have a way to get her across? Because she's got everything they could possibly want. A cool story, an athletic background. She's amazing to interview. And obviously she's a ferocious competitor, like the whole nine. but can they find donks for her to fight?
They unearthed them this time.
Well, here's the funny part about it. I know who she's fighting, even with a substitute.
Right.
I don't know who Big Nog's fighting or Little Nog's fighting. But Kayla Harrison, she's fighting Larissa Pacheco.
Right.
Like, I know that. I paid attention to that. To me, it's like they got to find names. The tournament makes them, to your point, but it's about getting that.
You're gonna have to brush off some people like the Sarah Kaufmans, who like are champions in other leagues, and even though
who's fighting 2 weight classes up.
Exactly. Even though it's that, at least she's a name you're throwing into this mix. I feel like that they've got to right because. Who's Sarah Kaufman fighting? Somebody named Morgan Fryer, I think, or Freer. I'm not even sure how she pronounces her name, but nobody's ever heard of this person. I feel like most of them are woodwork figures, but I think that's where you got to start.
Yeah.
You got to make them come. If you're creating the division for Kayla Harrison, you have to create all the contenders and everybody who's going to come towards.
Here's the one thing I'll say: I never thought NBC Sports cared about World Series of Fighting. I never thought they cared about the PFL. I do think that ESPN cares about MMA.
I think so too. Yeah.
And so that to me is a bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
All right. Time now for our last segment before we do After the Beat. Time now for Under the Radar, and there have been a bunch of stories. What's one story kind of floating around there in the ether we didn't talk about today? Kind of interesting, worth at least a mention. Start there, work our way forward. What do you got?
All right, so 2 guys who we haven't heard from in a long time, both signed fight contracts.
I knew you were going to do this one.
Matt Wyman, my boy, who's been gone for a long time. Yeah, Handsome Wyman for 5 years or something. The guy's basically a recluse who, we found out about through the Tough series and had some fights. But he's kind of a recluse, a very eccentric guy. He's returning to fight Luis Pena, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Maybe in South Carolina, I can't remember.
That's right, Greenville.
And then, and also Gilbert Melendez, who's like, it's been since 2017. I kind of, you forget about. He's hiding in plain sight a lot of times with all his analytical work, but he's signed on for a fight. And he's the guy he's fighting, Arnold Allen, is. I've had my eye on him because he's good. He's very quiet, 5-0 in the UFC. Yep. The only reason we're not talking about him is because he fought all of his fights in Europe.
Right.
So it's one of those weird do or die situations against a really tough dude. So those 2 guys, it's good to see them, like the old names cropping back up.
What do you got, Danny?
Sure.
What's under the radar?
Mark Ramundi, our former colleague reporter at ESPN, that Aaron Pico switched training camps. He's now training in Albuquerque under Greg Jackson. That's pretty exciting news because you see a guy like Pico, 4-2, so promising, but he's had already 2 major setbacks. You want to see him kind of switch camps and get different looks and see, how we can get the best out of him. And I feel like this is one of them. And I feel like in Albuquerque, over at Jackson Wings, they can do that. They can, there's so many experienced guys because that's what he needs. We know he's skilled. He just needs that experience. And hopefully, those
cats have to be excited to be taking a guy like that. And, they love those types of projects,
And Aaron Pico just seems, he's got that wrestling mentality where I'm just going to show up and, work. And yes, coach, I'm going to put in the work. And knowing how skilled those guys are, it's pretty exciting.
I was going to do that one. I think the second one I would bring up is it was a boxing fight. Did you guys watch the Canelo fight on DAZN?
Oh, I didn't get a chance to see it.
But I heard DAZN was quite a platform.
Dude, they royally effed that up.
Did they?
Yeah, here's the thing about it. If you watch Bellator on DAZN, you would be like, oh, that's more or less the Bellator experience to which I'm accustomed. Mm-hmm. Dude, they did a really bad job. Like, the shooting of the fight from a camera position was fine, but not good. They messed up Daniel Jacobs' intro. Yep. They ran the house music. And then
he had to go back?
He had to go back. They had to stop it and restart it.
Now I'm going to have to
and then when you watch the fight, you can't hear there's no miking of the ring, so you can't really hear the punches land.
Oh, man. That's the best part.
And to make matters worse, I do like Brian Kenny and Sergio Mora. I've had Sergio Mora. I've actually had both in studio. Yeah. They're great, but they were kind of, I think people are exaggerating how much they were advocating on behalf of Canelo, but they did a little bit. And so here's the funny part about it. Sergio Mora got criticized by Daniel Cormier on Twitter. And then Sergio Mora lashed out at him, which I thought was kind of interesting. Here's the other thing I wanted to bring up. It did 600,000 viewers domestically and 1.2 worldwide, which they consider to be a success. I only bring that up because it doesn't sound like TV numbers, but they're giving us benchmarks for what they're looking for. Keep that in mind. 600,000 domestic, 1.2 mil worldwide is what they got. They said they were very happy with that. So
wasn't Todd Grisham out there on the call? Was he doing prelims or something?
I don't know. But the main event was definitely Brian Kenny and Sergio Mora. And then Chris Mannix. Oh God! And then after we'll go to after the beat just a second. Then they had the fight analysis, and it was who was the dude who got fired from ESPN for leaking info? Adnan Virk or what? Something like that, right?
Yes.
All right. So DAZN hired him, and he was interviewing Sugar Ray Leonard. Sugar Ray Leonard had on like bright white pants that was like blinding me to watch. All right. And then in the back, the DJ was playing like terrible, like Black Hole Sun remixes. So goddamn loud, you could not hear what they were saying.
You've convinced me to look this thing up. I'm going to have to go watch the whole thing now.
DAZN has a lot of work to do for their boxing production. Again, Bellator seems to be like,
show, you know?
Bellator seems to be ready to rock, but oof, that was rough. All right. But we have taken your questions using the hashtag the MMA Beat for a segment we call After the Beat. We're going to answer them. We're going to do that right now.
That was on point.
All right, we're back. Time for After the Beat. I am Luke Thomas, sadly. There is Danny Segura, and at the end, it's the Iceman himself, Chuck Mindenhall, man in the hat. We have taken your questions using the hashtag the MMA Beat. We're going to answer them now, but before we take a look at them, Danny, I already asked Chuck. Chuck's answer to this question was yes. Let's see what yours is. Have you seen Avengers Endgame?
No.
Oh, boy.
Boy, it's going to be a rough show for Danny. All right, let's go to the first question. Danny, you go first. Will Frank Shamrock ever be inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame? Do you want a little inside info on that?
I would say, you know what? I'm going to be optimistic and say yes.
Yeah?
I'm going to say no.
Yeah,
But
I don't
probably
think so.
not. You know, he's had his, this is not an MMA Hall of Fame. This is a UFC Hall of Fame. And we know he's had his differences with the promotion.
So I know that they want to give it to him. I know that explicitly that they want to give it to him, but they believe he would not show up. And they don't want to be in a position where they're kind of like in absentia giving an award. So I think they're going to wait till the day where he doesn't feel salty. But,
Hey, but look, Ben Askren
the grudge is more with Shamrock than the UFC.
At this point, yes. Yeah. Well, at least in terms of Dana White has like let a lot of grudges go where like Dana and Frank will never ever shake hands, but like if Dana was like, someone's like, all right, dude, can you please let in Frank Shamrock to the goddamn Hall of Fame?
Right.
You're probably like, yeah, all right, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
But do you think, am I wrong?
No, I think was the question, will he ever get in?
Will he ever get in?
I think he will eventually, but
Yeah.
but it's
Gonna be
going to
an
have
old
to.
man.
They're going to have to thaw that out, man. I still feel like it's those old wounds or whatever the whole story is. You probably have more insight into what went on, but the whole thing still seems very active to me.
Yeah. And then also after the dog abuse stuff where he's leaving a dog at the airport.
Well, that's horrible.
You know, so it's like, even if they gave it to him now, all the media's going to be like, so you'd leave any dogs on the airport on the way here, you know?
Usually that's when the UFC does this, though, when it's so timing
Yeah.
is worst.
I can't believe they didn't sign up to a fight.
Tone deaf is what
You know?
they know, man.
Yeah.
All right, next. What is something you didn't like, Chuck, at first, and it took a while to appreciate? Music, a show, even a sport, anything. Anything you sort of liked over time?
Man, out of everything?
Anything. Pick anything. Good beer.
Anybody want to go first?
Good beer?
That's a good, I would say that IPAs, I know your favorite, that's something that I
was
did
the
not
opposite.
like. I did not like. And then over time, when they kind of evolved, the different hops, all that stuff, I grew to really like them. So I would say that's certainly one of them. But I feel like I'm trying to think of something like a sport or something like that, too. You got something?
So I was the opposite way with IPAs. When they
started
first
to
came
like
out,
it.
I'm like, oh, these are kind of cool because I got a buzz quicker. But then over time, I'm like, nah, this is not for me.
Yeah, because they're bad beers.
Yeah, I would say I was like that with peanut butter.
You're not a peanut butter guy?
At first, I wasn't.
Wow.
When in Colombia, like nobody eats peanut butter.
What do you put with jelly?
That's it, just jelly.
Jelly on bread?
Jelly and butter.
Butter?
Yeah, toast.
Okay, all right.
Peanut butter is not big at all in Colombia. I don't know if it has changed now because it is something you can put in shakes and
right.
like protein shakes and whatnot. And we've become, I think, healthier as a culture just in general. But yeah, at first I didn't like it. But then when I started wrestling in high school, that's all they would give out at the gyms, in between matches and whatnot. They would make 100 peanut butter jelly sandwiches. So I'm like, all right, this is what I got to eat. And then over time, it grew on me.
Figured out they were pretty good. Yeah, that's not a bad
And
one.
it's a cheap meal. It's like pretty reliable.
Yeah. It's packed with nutrients for the most part. Yeah.
Good fats.
Anything else? No.
I'm trying to think what else.
I can't think of anything I was strongly against that I turned on eventually and liked.
Any viewpoint you've ever changed on?
How about you? You got something?
PEDs one was a big one for me.
Yeah.
I won't go into it, but certainly the more I read about that, the more I felt like there was a discussion that wasn't being had. In terms of foods, I was never much of a picky eater, I don't think.
It's a tough one. I know that I'll kick myself because there'll be something that's glaring later.
There was a time in my life when I was really, it was pretentious. Thank God I don't do it anymore. I was like really into wines. But then you get into wine culture, you're like, I hate all of you. I can't stand it.
I've had stuff where you peter out on it, like you get enthusiastic, and then pretty soon you're like, nah, this isn't what I thought.
Yeah. That's the way I was with that. Beer culture's better. Like IPAs are gross and they're the most overrated beer imaginable, but beer culture's cool. I think spirits culture's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Wine culture is awful. Ugh, God.
Anytime you force the highbrow and all this, I'm like, nah.
Yeah, and they like,
Pass.
we can only call this because it's from the region in France which it is made. Eat ass, God. Gross people. So yeah, but I'll still get hammered off a Thunderbird. Don't think I won't. Mad Dog 2020. I'll never forget one time I went into
a headache just thinking about it.
I went to the liquor store one time. I'll never forget this. And there was these, what do you want to call them? Rural, simple people in the liquor store. And one was on the phone talking to the other. And it was a she. And she must have been talking to a he for a larger conversation she was having. But anyway, the question to the person on the other line was, what flavor wine do you want? And I was like, flavored wine? You know what, lady? You're going to have a good night tonight. I know that.
The wine connoisseur, there's a huge spectrum there then.
Yeah.
We're talking about a pretty big range.
Yeah, that was pretty. I was just in the aisle being like, I think I bought Jim Beam. I'm no better. Next. All right. Y'all happy or sad that Colby Covington didn't spoil Endgame for everyone?
I didn't even notice.
Exactly. I got to tell you, sad.
Yeah,
Very
you
sad.
like that.
Dude, when he sits there and does this to everybody, I kind of like it.
You get a kick out of it.
And when you go back to the original one, because remember, he spoiled Star Wars.
You're a big Star Wars guy.
Yeah, he kind of pissed me off for a minute.
But did you get the spoiler first?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
I did. I was really annoyed by it. And then I was like, God damn, that's so funny. And what really was the entertainment was if you got to, because remember, when I think it was The Last Jedi he spoiled. When he spoiled The Last Jedi, it came out on the same day as the NFL draft.
Yeah.
So he was tagging all the NFL draft stuff. Just catching bodies on the block. You understand? And if you went through and read the comments, oh my God, the amount of butt hurt is impossible to overstate.
I'm weird. Like, so spoilers. I see that everybody's like they expect people not to spoil things.
It drives me crazy.
But I'm sort of like, come on. If you're on social media, people can treat it however they want. I'm like,
Yeah, I never get too mad on spoilers. If there's fights, for example, that I don't want spoiled or any type of show, dude, I stay away from social media 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What's your rule on a movie spoiler? Even the Avengers people gave it a week.
Yeah.
It was a week or so, and then they were like, yeah, whatever. They lifted the social media.
I'm not a guy who would go on there anyway. Like, I just don't use social media this way. But, like, I would probably not go on there and even after a week and talk about it.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, as the etiquette, it would be like, if I'm thinking about my own personal etiquette, it would probably be something like that. You'd want to give everybody the chance. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be the guy who's spoiling it, but at some point, I'm sort of like, you want to be able to talk about it, right? Like, so.
If you haven't watched whatever program you were supposed to watch after a week, you're probably not a diehard fan. So,
by the way, didn't that movie overtake the Titanic as the greatest grossing?
Yeah, 1.2 billion in a weekend.
Insane, man.
I'm missing out.
Dude, yeah, it's crazy.
I've never been into superhero movies. Just the Dark Knight series, and
I was not into them either. But this was.
Let me tell you. Where did you see the movie?
Just at our local theater.
Okay, so I saw it at one of these theaters where you can pick your seat. Which, are you the type of person...
with the recliner and everything?
Yeah. They're nicer seats. I don't know if they recline.
Ours were like that.
Yeah?
Let
me ask you this.
16 seats.
Yeah. Which system is better? First come, first serve on tickets or buy your seat?
You love to be organized because you hate Southwest because you don't want to just be all on there. So I know what your answer is on this.
I personally believe, and I want this to sway your opinion, I believe that first come, first serve is for street dogs and organized seats are for human beings.
Well, I never had a problem with it until they started introducing the assigned seats. And then you're like, I kind of like this because you can pick, like, if you're going with 4 people, You can then say, we're getting 4 seats together, or you can find out ahead of time and be like, we're going to sit 2 here and 2 here. I'd rather know, I think, especially for movies like, we're going to sell out and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm with Chuck.
All right, all right. So
No, I don't feel too strongly about just first come, first serve either. But if I had a preference, I'd like to pick my seats.
yeah, okay. So that's where I'm at. That's very much. And every time it has been a success, except for Avengers Endgame.
Yeah.
The people behind me, it's a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
They talked the entire time. Now, understand, the last time I asked somebody to shut up in a movie theater, it caused a huge problem. So I just can't do it anymore. Plus, it was a bunch of kids, and I'm like, they're going to tell me to go F off, then I'm going to take the L. And they kind of stopped during the action scene, so I was like, okay, here's what I noticed, and you'll appreciate this.
Yeah.
For the first 2 hours, they absolutely ruined the movie. For the last hour, they made that movie so much better. And you can imagine why.
Yes.
If you've not seen it, you wouldn't get it. But if you've seen Avengers Endgame, the last hour, a little bit different than the first two. And they were hooting and hollering, boy, and it was a show. It was a show. But
What an adventure.
I wanted to move seats, but I was like, I can't. I bought this one, and so I'm stuck next to this mouth breather. I have an excuse for mouth breathing. They didn't. And I wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
So there you go. All right, next. Now that Denver, Chuck, has made mushrooms legal, which I
heard about
cannot
this.
believe.
One of my buddies was texting me about that.
Do you think next UFC event there will help the MMA Beat finally unlock the cosmic mysteries of fighter pay, the ESPN era, why BJ Penn still competes, and how Chuck Mindenhall writes so well? Here's my question to you. What is up with Denver that y'all are legalizing just about everything? What is it in the culture in Denver?
Man, it's a mile high in the sky.
There's got to be something. There's a lot of progressive
not getting
places.
to the-
Denver's different.
It wasn't like that when I was growing up, man.
What was it like?
Not like that. More like just there was a little bit of an old west feel to it, honestly, and a very inferiority complex about other bigger cities like L.A. people and all that. Denver was just this little town that you flew over, But now, over the course of time, and I think Boulder, Boulder, and some of the progressive communities that basically grew out of that probably helped steer that a little bit. And then Denver got very hip very quickly. And I would just guess that that's kind of the direction of it. The mushrooms one is a weird one. I didn't even anticipate that. I didn't even know it was.
And the polling indicated at the very last minute that it would fail.
Yeah.
And
it barely, it was like 50.5% versus 40,
Yeah.
But I know one thing. I've got plenty of buddies out there who are happy.
So is there
a bunch
going to
of
be like
texts.
mushroom dispensaries now? Or?
I'm not sure exactly what the law entails. It could
And it's for recreational. There's no medicinal.
Well, that depends. If you talk to psychedelic mushroom users, they will tell you that it has medicinal properties.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they'll say that. But I'm saying as far as you can't go to a doctor and be like, oh.
I do not know what the law calls for. So, for example, in Denver, you can go to a dispensary and just walk on in.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C., where I live, you cannot. But if you have it on the street, cops don't really care.
You guys need some mushrooms. I'm going to be out in Denver. In
Yeah.
2 weeks. Whatever you guys need.
But has there always been a bit of a drug culture out there?
Oh, yeah. I grew up out there, went to college out there. You'd go to concerts, for instance, and, most, I would say that mushrooms, those types of drugs were just about everywhere. It was very Woodstock even back then. But I'm not sure where, the progressive, it's funny that it's emerged on that level as a progressive culture.
Yeah.
But I think Boulder, honestly, just because people love the idea of Boulder being a college town and it's pretty close to Denver, I feel like at some point those two things just started to intersect. You know?
Never seen more white dudes with dreadlocks than Aurora.
Aurora, yeah. There's a lot of them in general.
Birkenstocks and dreadlocks, boy.
It's
Woo.
a lot of that, man.
Good coffee, though. Good beer.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another part. Denver has great local beers.
Yeah,
really good.
Denver has,
beer scene's great.
yeah, they're microbrew, like their breweries now, there's so many, the whole thing is just so different from when I grew up. Now that I'm away, it's gotten to be the coolest thing anywhere. So, but I still get back there enough to enjoy it.
People in Denver get sauced up.
Oh, yes, they do.
Chilling in the cut. All right, next. We're blazing through these. With this being the football season of Champions League comebacks, Danny, what, in your opinion, is the greatest comeback in a fight you've ever seen? Let me set this up. You don't watch soccer at all, do you?
Not much.
This has been the greatest Champions League I've ever
So
seen.
there's the finals of the Champions League is just one game, but the semifinals it's 2 games. Each team plays one home, one away.
Okay.
In the second leg of each, there have been what can only be described as Liverpool over Barcelona and then Tottenham over Ajax yesterday. two of the greatest comebacks you'll ever see in world football.
Really?
Dude, they
I
were.
saw you guys tweeting about it, so.
It was
Barcelona had a 3-goal lead, so you had Liverpool had to hung 4 on them
and not get scored on.
and not get scored on, and then Tottenham was down aggregate 3-2. But if they had scored one more, if you have more away goals, you win. And they scored.
It was 1-0. But then they scored.
Well, I'm saying, but it was 3-2 aggregate heading into so they had 5 minutes of stoppage time. When the clock struck 5:01, they scored.
Oh my God!
For the last one to advance, like a shocking comeback, thrilling to watch. With that spirit in mind, Danny, some good MMA comebacks or boxing too.
I don't know if people remember this, and if you haven't seen it, I suggest you go to UFC Fight Pass and look up Claudio Puelles versus whatever Brazilian he fought. I remember this was in UFC Chile.
Yeah.
Claudio Puelles just got destroyed the entire fight, and he kept attempting this knee bar, and kept failing and failing. And then last minute he got it, and it was.
And they could have stopped that fight a number of times.
He was dropped like 5 times throughout that entire fight. That was a pretty crazy comeback that I remember. I thought it was my comeback of the year pick in 2018.
Okay.
What are the comebacks we've seen?
What about Yair Rodriguez? I mean,
That
that
was
fight was
wild as well.
ridiculous.
Yeah, that was
just
insane.
the way.
Oh God, I didn't remember that. Yeah, good point.
The way he did it.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
like the way he did it at the time. It's just kind of crazy.
Would Hughes Trigg 2 count as a comeback?
Yeah, right? I mean,
He got hit in the balls. Yeah.
That was I would say so. The UFC 117, obviously, I always think back to I was there, obviously, for that one, Anderson Silva against Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
That one always.
Darren Elkins and Mirsad Bektic.
Also,
Oh my God.
John Howard, who's fighting in the PFL this weekend, had a crazy fight with Dennis Hallman. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yeah.
God, I don't.
Where he was losing every single second of the fight, and I think it was literally like 10 seconds left. He just rushes at him with a barrage of punches and knocks him out.
Wow.
Like literally like 2 seconds remaining.
What about Wilder? It was close, right? The whole Wilder Fury fight, like that was
Yeah.
close to being a ridiculous something there.
Yeah. Boy, if he had knocked him out, that would
know.
have been. And then he got up, and I'm like, what?
I know. He got up like nothing happened. I was like,
Yeah.
it was the weirdest.
This week was, how much you would have called a comeback? Yeah, I guess you could call it a comeback. Was Corrales Castillo.
Yeah.
Was the anniversary of it was this week. Trying to think of anything else that really sort of stands out.
I mean, Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that
the
one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Fedor and Fujita.
Yeah.
Fujita had him hurt. And he came back and just, and then Rampage Jackson, if you watch the commentary, makes fun of his teeth.
Derek Lewis.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my
right?
God. How could I forget?
Yeah, those are the types that stand out because they were just so dramatic. You've already wrapped your mind around that this fight is over, and then it switches that fast. I mean, those are crazy, right?
Yeah, those are good ones. All right, next. Who is the most overrated and underrated character in the Marvel comic universe, Chuck?
Oh, God. See, this is like, so you're way more versed in this probably than me. So
Probably.
overrated. So in the Marvel universe, are we talking about like just the stuff as it is right now in this Marvel universe they're rolling out? We're not talking about, okay. So overrated would be.
I'll tell you who's overrated as shit.
Who?
The Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
He
I agree
comes
with you.
out
I
of
agree
this
with you.
universe like a dud.
He's all smiley. I don't want to ruin it for you, man, but
Yeah.
I have no
his
idea what you
demeanor
guys
has
are talking
changed
about.
in this. Yeah, I would. That's a good one. I was trying to think. Who? And he's a kid in this, but the Spider-Man was obviously like. You always grew up thinking Spider-Man was like this badass, and in this he's kind of like this kid who's learning.
He's
how
a bit
to
of a
do it.
dorky teenager,
Yeah.
right?
So I don't know if I'd be over.
I thought out of this whole MCU experience, have you seen any of the Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that I wouldn't say he's the most underrated, but I thought Batista. There's two.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Batista with Drax was super unheralded.
Yeah.
I gotta say Star-Lord, or who's his name, Chris Pratt,
Yeah.
Quill, and then I think the most underrated is Rocket, who is voiced by Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
He is just so funny, and so there's actually way more depth to him if you watch Endgame. I loved Rocket. I love the humor. I love the sardonic nature of him. I love the fact that he's a thief, and an S-head. I love him.
Underrated would be. Is her name Captain Marvel?
Yeah, she sucked though.
Yeah, but she kind of shows up and just kind of saves things.
I kind of ruined the movie a little bit, but it's like I did not find that she was that interesting a character. I did not find that I really enjoyed her presence in the MCU. to be quite honest with
You
you.
watch Lord of the Rings or no? I can't remember.
A long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah. Why?
No, I was just curious because this question would have probably been good for who's overrated and underrated because now that they've had these big wars and stuff like these.
Every
things-
Hobbit overrated.
No.
Every Hobbit.
You watch it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Huge fan.
I was one of those guys watching Lord of the Rings. I was like, I hope the orcs kill everybody.
I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
If you love Lord of the Rings, why can't you go watch? How far apart is Thor and Lord of the Rings?
Pretty far.
Ah.
Yeah. Because at least Lord of the Rings, the characters, like there was some magic involved, but there wasn't like people weren't flying.
Yeah, just talking dragons. That's all. Just talking dragons. I don't know.
But the dragons had wings, so it explained why they were flying.
Yeah. They're still talking dragons, Danny.
Talking dragons?
Yeah. Who's guarding all the
Okay, on the
gold?
Hobbit. Yeah, yeah. Well, that was like a special dragon that. Yeah.
Yes, it was a special dragon. Do you hear yourself?
Yeah. All right. Fine. Maybe I'll get into
Did
it.
you see?
I'll
Joe,
see.
did you see Avengers Endgame? Yeah. Did you like it? Yeah. Who's the most overrated character in Avengers Endgame? Or the Marvel comic universe? What you got? You agree that Hulk comes out? Hulk comes out.
I do agree.
There have been two characters in my life that I wanted to get killed when I was actually in the theater. One is this new Hulk, which breaks my heart because I have the Hulk stuff on my MMA Hour set because the old Hulk was the Lou Ferrigno
pacifist.
ripping arms off people. And then the other one was Kylo Ren from Star Wars. Oh, what an emo teenager. I was hoping Chewbacca would destroy this loser.
Rest in peace.
I'm with you on that too.
No, Chewbacca's still alive. I hated Kylo Ren, crying about everything and being mad and sulking. Fuck Kylo Ren. All right, last one.
But I think
Well,
the
that was-
actor
here we
recently
go.
passed away.
Jordan Burroughs, boys, says he wants to fight one time. That's right, he did. For this question, let's say that's the case. After giving him time to train, would you give him someone who has never fought, someone who has a decent amount of experience, or someone with a name for more of a
If it's
money
just
fight?
one fight,
One fight. You got a one-fight contract.
I'd like to see a money fight.
Ben
I think-
Askren versus Jordan.
Did you
Burroughs.
see Ben Askren versus?
Yeah, I was there.
Everyone got on Ben Askren because it's like, dude, Ben Askren did the ESPN car wash the day of that event. He knew he was going to get
Donated his
smoked.
proceeds. He knew everything about it.
Yeah.
I was watching him even while the previous match was going on. He's just watching. He's a fan. He's a guy who loves wrestling. He was there to support wrestling.
Yeah.
I felt like I wrote a piece about this, but I felt like people got a little bit hung up on Ben
title?
Askren got smoked.
Well, he did
But-
get smoked. He got tech
So he got
balled.
smoked, but the piece was literally flattering. I was like basically saying, hey man, he came in and people were loving it, and he was,
He made people care. It
made
was for a
people
good
care,
cause.
and he's every bit the nerd as they are. They're all watching this thing and this community, and that's what I really saw was the wrestling community come together, and I was like, wow, this is really something.
Hey, by the
man.
way, how about all this talk with Jordan Burroughs?
Right.
I've been interviewing Jordan Burroughs since 2011 or 12.
Yeah.
And every time he's like, nah. And now you're finally saying, here's a little bit.
Yeah.
It's in no small part to what Ben Askren did.
100%.
Falling on a sword a little bit.
And I tell you, in watching that, and I haven't watched a lot of them. I know you watch a lot of collegiate wrestling, and I know a lot of guys who do, but I personally don't watch that much of it. But just seeing him compete and how explosive he was, I was like, man, it did occur to me. I was like, if this guy did MMA, it would be something.
Michael Chandler said on Monday, because remember they wrestled each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said that was the best athlete he has ever competed against, ever.
There was.
he
Did
was
you
just
watch it?
blasted
Did you
over-
watch
Yeah.
So there was a part where he just takes Ben's legs out and they go over and Ben goes off the off the tarmac there.
Yeah.
I was like, just watching that alone, I was like, dude, can you imagine this guy in a cage? Like, who's gonna stop his double leg?
Right, once he gets on top of you, it's a wrap.
So I mean, to answer the question, I would put him in a money fight because just because he has in such strength his core. Like what he's able to do, I feel like that would offset some of the more skilled position, some of the stuff that maybe those guys would have that he wouldn't. But who knows, how MMA is. But I would favor that.
Yeah.
If you could wrestle, man, you could save yourself a lot. What do you think?
Yeah. If it's a one fight, why not against Ben Askren? Yeah.
That'd be interesting to play it back. But although Ben's in the octagon, he likes to incorporate his wrestling more than anything, right? So
Yeah, but also, I mean, Ben
can grapple his ass off,
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
He can grapple.
Ben doesn't use it, but Ben has a guard.
yes,
Right? Ben knows how to use jiu-jitsu in a way that Jordan Burroughs would not be aware of,
Right.
probably.
I would say that would be the biggest fear for a guy like Jordan Burroughs.
And also-
you better know what you're doing if you're on the ground and not get caught.
Yeah.
Askren has the MMA experience. He's got almost 20 fights. He has to have some advantage in the striking as well. So
Yeah, probably. But this just goes to show you these worldwide sports, with these high participatory rates, like wrestling, soccer, weightlifting, whatever. The athletes, the top athletes that come out of that, you can see why they come over to MMA and just dominate. It's not hard.
And at the end of that Burroughs Askren match, Askren was kind of jokey, and he tried to kill me, and Burroughs was like, hey, this wasn't a joke to me. I was going in. I liked hearing him. I was like, it just sounded very intense.
He's a smart dude.
Yeah. I just and I will say that I haven't been to a ton of wrestling events that are strictly wrestling. That was a very lively theater. There was about 5,000 paid people in there in that Hulu theater, and it was that community's strong, man. And it's kind of cool to see something at the ground floor that's a core essence of MMA, right? Like you're watching something that's basically, if you have this, you have maybe the most important thing. If you can dictate kind of where the fight takes place and that sort of thing. But to see it all in there and hear people calling out the points, getting mad when it's a 2 when they wanted 4, I mean, it was way more intense than I thought it would be.
Here's one of the big differences, too, and then we'll end on this. Event like Beat the Streets, they had Kyle Snyder, Jaden Cox, Jordan Burroughs, Ben Askren, Nick Soriano. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
These are like big names. Yeah. I think David Taylor, would he wrestle on the card as well?
I believe so. For me, it was an introduction to a lot of these guys. But hearing the reaction, I like the Soriano guy. I was like, dude, the fans were just all
Soriano is a hard, as we call him in the Marine Corps, he is a hard charger, dude. He's a super hard charger. You get A-class competitors. Well, this is less true now, but one of the big problems that had been historically true for sport jiu-jitsu with these pro events, you don't get the A-class competitors. You get maybe 1 or 2, and then you get a lot of B-class.
Right.
Not with this one. You got A-classes coming out for this one. And so there's a real star factor to it.
There was.
That just makes a big, big difference in the end, So there we are. All right. Well, Chuck spoiled Avengers Endgame, so that kind of ruins it for you guys, but what else is new? He's the new Colby Covington. We appreciate you guys tuning in. I believe we're back next week, but I got to see what everything is happening. Hopefully by then I don't look like a mangled idiot who's been in a car wreck and I look like I'm ambulance chasing.
Hey, that speaks to your fortitude to show up here and pull this one out.
Sure. Mostly just I want bigger paychecks. Okay. But enjoy UFC 237. You've got all the coverage you'll need with Guilherme Cruz, who is down there in Brazil. Enjoy Bellator 221.
Jose Youngs is at Bellator 221.
Exactly. We got folks on the ground there as well. So we got you covered right here at MMA Fighting. We appreciate you guys watching. For Chuck, for Danny, I'm Luke. Until next time, hands up, shin down, let them fly. This is the MMA Beat.